Hello and welcome. In today's video, we will be having a look at an old report that used Vcad, and we will be updating it to use the new markers feature that was recently released. For starters, let's have a look at our old report that we have over here. Now, the goal of this report was to highlight the progress on installation of some equipment inside of our hospital. And we did that through the use of themes. Now, there are some features of this report that we're going to want to keep and some that we are instead are going to want to enhance. So let's have a look exactly at how it worked. So for starters, what we could do is filter our model based on the different levels or floors of our building. So we could section the model based on the floors and get in closer and understand how progress is going. Next up, we can have a look at which objects were involved. So specifically, as I mentioned, we're looking at some equipment, particularly grab bars and railings. And we can see them if we hide everything that isn't selected or go into the X-ray mode. We can see that only these objects remain visible. Now, the way we communicated to the user the progress was through applying a theme to these objects. So we categorize the objects in 4 different progress levels. Number 1 from 0 to 25%, which means that progress hadn't started or was at the very beginning, all the way to level 4 from 75 to 100%, which meant that either the element had been installed completely or was nearing completion and we had a completion date. We mapped these 4 different levels to colors, and then as you can see here, we applied the colors to the objects. So at a glance, we can look at the objects and know green means it's been installed, yellow is a work in progress, whereas red is at the very beginning. Furthermore, what we could do if we wanted to have more information is hover over these objects and connecting directly to the Power BI dynamic tooltipping engine, we were able to get some further information. So what object I'm looking at, the precise progress that we have, and if we have them, start and end date. And we did all of this simply by defining a tooltip report that you can see down here and filtering all of the data in this report based on the object that we're interacting with. So if we switch back to our report, this is the main functionality that we have, and we want to keep this. However, we want to make it a little better. Specifically, if these objects tend to be kind of small compared to the entirety of our model, so they can be a little hard to identify. To identify them easily, you either have to hide everything, which loses a lot of context, or go into X-ray mode, which can be a little noisy. And in any case, we found that it's easier if you section the model. However, sometimes you may want to review the entirety of the model and not have to go on a floor-by-floor basis. So what we can do in this case is leverage the markers. Let's see how we do that. For starters, we're going to go ahead and duplicate this page, and we're going to rename it so we know what we're doing here. Okay, now activating markers is really simple. All we need to do is select our custom visual, head on over to the formatting options, and activate the new marker option over here. This option is available starting with version 1.3.0 of the Vcad custom visual. So if you don't have it, you may want to be updating the version you're using. Now let's go ahead and toggle this on, and you can see we get a bunch of different dots all over our model. Basically what happens is we're applying a marker to every object in our selection. So every single grab bar, every single railing that we have in our model is now identified by a marker. Maybe for now we can make it a little simpler if we zoom in on one case. And just to check, we can see that here we have our grab bars and the markers are being applied, you can see in the geometric center of the grab bars. So for example, these grab bars, you can see it when I hover over them. Actually, these two are both the same element. Therefore, the marker is being placed in the sort of geometric center between all of the parts of these two elements. Same goes for every other marker that we see in the model. Now, one nice thing of the markers is, as you can see, no matter how I move the model, they're always visible. Now this of course can be toggled, it depends on what we're trying to do. We can come over here to the controls and set them to be occluded, which means that they will only be visible when there are no other geometries in front of them. Or we can go ahead and say that we always want them in front. And for this case, we're going to keep them always in front. Okay, so we have our markers. A nice thing of the markers is they are automatically connected to the tooltipping engine. So the tooltip we had defined before, we can see still works perfectly fine. When we move from one to another, we're filtering that report page based on the object we're interacting with, which is great. However, these markers now look all the same, so we're losing some of that immediate information that we had before. So we don't know how these objects are classified. We can easily fix that by going to the settings of our custom visual. In the bindings, if we have a look at the highlight color over here, we can see that we defined this installation progress theme, which is pulling from the installation levels table, specifically the colors column. So this over here. What we can do is we can go ahead and grab that and drag it over to the marker color. And now the markers immediately gain the new color. So now again, at a glance, I know which objects have been completely installed or are nearing completion, and which instead require still quite some time. Okay, so now we're pretty much at where we were before. However, the objects are easier to interact with than what they were in our previous example. However, we can get a little more creative. For example, we could set up different icons to signify the different stages of our installation progress. So let's go ahead and have a look at how we're going to do that. Again, we can come over here and we can have a look at the marker settings. If we open the marker settings, there's a bunch of different things you can do, and you'll always be presented with 3 example marker configurations. These are just to give you an idea of what the configuration looks like. For now, we can go ahead and remove them. We're not going to use these 3, we're going to define some new ones. Next, let's have a look at the icons that we have available. So if we come over here to the image for markers, you can see you have 2 default icons that you can use for any case. But in this case, we're going to go ahead and load in some new icons. So we can come over here, add image. We're going to give them an ID, but let's have a look at the actual files we have. So if we come over to upload, we're going to be loading in these 3 icons. The preferred file format is SVG because it is a very light format, which will scale great depending on how big you want your icon. So this would be the way to go. So we're going to have a check, a cross, and a wrench. Let's go ahead and start out with the check. Here we go, and we can give it a name and save. Let's load in the other 2 as well. I'm going to say this cross. Load in the cross, SVG. And finally, check out our wrench. Okay. Okay, so now we have our icons inside of our custom visual. We're going to have to set up the actual marker configuration, the marker styles. Now, in our report, we have 4 different levels of progress, basically from 0 to 25, 25 to 50, 50 to 275, 75 to 100. But we have only 3 icons. So what we're going to do is we're going to set up different marker settings that map those 4 classifications for the colors to our 3 icons. So let's start easy. Let's go ahead with the cross. Before we do this, however, we need to check out how we're going to connect this configuration to the actual visual, because we're going to need to bind some data to the visual to allow Vcad to know which marker it's going to be rendering. So let's go ahead and actually close this out and figure out what we're going to put in this type field. We can save for now, that way we keep the new icons we've set up. And we're going to have a look at, if we shrink this a little, and we drop a table right here, we can check out this installation color configuration that we have. And we see the various fields we have is the color, which is of course the color that we're passing over here, a simple description, and then we actually have this level, which gives us a number from 1 to 4, representing the various levels. This is something that we can use to identify the various styles that we want to apply to our markers. So we can go ahead and close this, remove this table, we're not going to need it. We can make this big again. Let's go back to the settings, to the marker settings. Now let's create our new marker configuration. So let's go ahead with type number 1, which will be progress from 0 to 25%. Let's select the cross icon. We could set up a color directly in here. However, since we're passing the color from our theme, the color that we select here would be overridden. So for now, we're just going to leave them white. This could also have been achieved by setting a specific color for the various markers. Let's go ahead and set up a new one. So we have type 2, which will be our work in progress from 25 to 50%. So we're going to give it a wrench. We're going to add level number 4, and again, we're going to give it a wrench icon from 50 to 75%. And finally, level 4, either complete or nearing completion, and we can give it a nice big check. Okay, so now we've set up 4 different marker styles to apply to our object. So we can go ahead and save. Select a custom visual. In the bindings, we can go ahead and over here where it says marker style, we're going to drag in the information that marks which matches with that type that we defined. So this level field over here. If we drag this in, we go ahead and switch tabs and come back again. The model will be reloaded. We can see there are no markers right now because we actually forgot to set up one configuration for the markers. If we select a custom visual and we come on over to the marker section, here we have an enable on start. If we toggle enable on start on every time the model is loaded, the markers will be activated. If we don't, the markers will only be activated at the first selection change. So if we were to select something in here, now the markers would appear, but we want them always. So to do that, let's go ahead and just toggle selection enable on start. And now if we switch tabs and come back again, we can see that the markers are visible. And not only are they visible, but the colors are being applied. So we can see over here we have an orange wrench, and over here we have a yellow wrench, signifying the different stages of progress. The last thing that we can do to make our report a little easier to use is actually make this markers slightly bigger because they're a little tiny at the moment. So if we go over to the marker settings, over here we have a resize tool. So we can just move this to 35 will do, or 34 is fine. You can go ahead and save. Again, switch tabs, come back, and check out how the report has changed. And there you go. So now the markers are bigger and they're a little more visible. We're applying marker icons based on a rule, which is the different levels, and we're applying the themes based on a data binding to a color. And so finally, if we zoom out a bit, we can see the progress on the entirety of the model. Thank you for joining us for this look at using markers and updating existing reports. Stay tuned for more videos to come.